What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So today is indeed going to be Wednesday, which means a new summit is now live, which, by the way, for this week is going to be the Hoonigan This versus That, which is probably going to be a good way to say that because every event is literally going to be titled This versus That. But nonetheless, though, guys, there is going to be 6 events here that are all going to be Street Tier 2. Kind of mixed on that at first, but I have to admit many of the events are fun. At least except for the bottom one here, which I would say this one is probably going to be a bit of an annoyance. And then, of course, we also have 3 slaloms on the bottom, which I would say wasn't all that shocking with it being like a this versus that kind of theme, back and forth. Not sure where I'm going with this, but first thing I do want to start on, though, is going to be these slaloms here. So for all 3 of these, I did decide to use a monster truck, which, by the way, if you guys are running basically any vehicle with a score breaker set, you are most likely going to be able to get all of these done with basically ease. I mean, I would say the hardest part about these is to probably have a score breaker set active. And of course, I would also recommending putting some of your legend points on skill to at least give you a bit more of an advantage on these. But I do have to admit though, I would probably say the slaloms are most likely going to be the easiest skill to do in this game with a score breaker set active. I would even go as far as saying, guys, as long as you have basically a score breaker on any vehicle class in this game, you can easily get 150,000 points in every single one of these. And then, of course, moving over to the 6 main events in this summit, there is something I did want to mention. I actually was going to do this last week, but I was like, you know what? Let's wait for the next summit and try this out then. I also decided, guys, to basically only go first-person mode on all 6 of the main events here. I did also decide not to do this in the main 3 slaloms, but for all 6 of the main events, I actually was in cockpit view. I also have to admit, by the way, it really was going to be a fun experience doing that. And it's also going to be a bit more challenging, especially on this last event over here. But moving over to the first event here is going to be with the lovely Audi TT RS Coupe, which, by the way, rest in peace to this car because it is indeed coming to an end. Similar to the lovely Audi R8, which I do think is honestly really sad, but one of the biggest things I did notice about this event is probably going to come down to the fact that you can skip most of the corners in this one, which I would say, of course, in return is going to make you a lot faster overall around this track. Do keep in mind, by the way, to definitely hit that nitrous coming out of those corners to be as fast as possible. And then for the next 2 events, though, the first one here, you can basically run any car of your choice. The bottom one, though, is going to be tied to Germany, so I was like, you know what, let's run the exact same car in both of them. That is going to be the 911 Carrera 4S Timeless Edition, which, by the way, I have to admit right off the bat is not going to be the best choice for either one. But at the same time, I do like running cars you basically never see in these. And I also have to admit, by the way, being in first-person mode, these cars sound absolutely insane. And I really do have to give it to Ubisoft with how well they did with this. But I do have to admit, though, the biggest thing with both of these events is by far going to come down to the cornering once again. And the reason why I say that is the biggest thing is if you are in manual, definitely try to be in a higher gear. That way, when coming out of them, if you hit your nitrous, you can basically rocket out of these corners and be that much faster. And now moving over to the next event is going to be with the lovely BMW M4, which, by the way, I have not even driven this car yet until this event right now. I also have to admit, by the way, it's going to be a pretty decent Tier 2 vehicle for the most part. Is it going to be the best car in the class? Well, I would probably say no, but I also haven't tested the other ones out yet, so I can't really say the M4 is going to be bad in any way, but I would recommend, by the way, the biggest thing about this race is to definitely get good with the racing lines on them. And what I mean by that is to basically get around the corners the best way possible, and also going around like the one corners where you can basically go straight through them, almost instead of like doing like an S style of a turn. You basically go in like a straight line through that said turn instead of doing that. Which I would say, by the way, the biggest thing is to get around those turns as fast as you possibly can. And of course, watch out for the AI in the beginning, because they really do get in the way on this one. And now moving over to the next event here is going to be with the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 6 GSR, which of course is going to have a pretty long name. It barely fits on the thing here. But I have to admit, by the way, this event's probably going to be on the annoying side for one big thing. That is going to be the tight corners going around this entire event, which, by the way, you are most likely going to recognize this one from a while back on that one event with a monster truck. This is going to be the exact same race on this. Also, do keep in mind in first person mode, this car is going to be a right hand drive, which I would say was insanely odd doing like the first time ever. But I would say though, do not be afraid to cut some corners to increase your speed around this one, which I would say is probably going to be a thing I have been noticing with every event in this summit so far. I would say the biggest thing with this one is probably the fact of going around each corner quicker, and basically every single event in this summit seems to have a lot of cornering. And then for the last event in this summit, similar to last week, it's probably going to be the most annoying event in the entire summit. Do keep in mind, by the way, for this one, I also did decide to run the lovely Nissan GT-R Nismo, which, by the way, is going to be an insanely good car. Like, if you are kind of mixed on which Japanese Street Tier 2 vehicle you do want to pick, I would definitely recommend trying out the GT-R Nismo. Like, this thing not only sounds amazing, it also handles insanely well. And I would most likely say picking that car on the other event is probably a better option. But for this one though, the biggest thing though is I also did do this in first person mode, which by the way was not the smartest idea with the amount of jumps in this event. I basically could not see anything jumping over them, but I also do want to mention, by the way, do not be afraid to use that nitrous while in the air. It's not only going to make you a lot faster while being in the air itself, it's also going to be a great way to straighten out that vehicle if you might have happened to hit that jump the wrong way. But overall, though, I do have to admit this summit was going to be a pretty funny experience for the most part, even though I was basically doing all of the main events in first-person mode, which, by the way, was a lot more fun than I actually expected. I also want to say, by the way, guys, the reward for this week is going to be the lovely Hoonigan Slayer tire, which I would say is probably going to look insanely nice on the Hoonicorn, or at least any of the Hoonigan vehicles for that matter. But if you have any questions at all, let me know in the comments below. Let's jump right into this.